turn it on, it actually makes like food.
Yeah.
It has the owl noise and everything.
They're pretty remarkable invention. Mute my- Right, so I want to call to order the February 20th meeting of the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission. We are meeting hybrid, remote, and in person, and 6 p.m. to get started. This meeting is being recorded. I'm going to do a roll call to establish a quorum. Seth Engelborg. Here. Don Holgate. Here. Wendy Hudson.
Here.
I do not see Dave Iverson at this time. Christina Jellamy.
Here.
I do not see Bert Johnson at this time. Matt Lowell.
Here.
Barry Rector, do not see at this time. Joe Topham.
Here.
John Trudell.
Here.
And I'm Mary Longacre, Chair of the NPEDC. Staff present, we have Leslie Snell, the Planning Director. Here. Megan Trudell, Senior Planner.
Present.
Mike Burns, Transportation Program Manager.
Here.
And Mike, do we have DOT yet? I don't see Ray's,
I don't see that.
okay. Let me know if they join, please. Okay, the first item on our agenda is the federal fiscal year 2024 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP amendment. We had a public review period open. Mike, do you want to introduce that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're correct. At your January 22nd meeting, you approved a public review period to end today, February 20th. This was to add the purchase of 3 electric buses per a Department of Environmental Protection grant for a total amount of $879,000. Next, please. There's just a picture of the vehicle that we're purchasing with the low floor. I'll note that the public comments received, I have some updated numbers. There were actually 161 public comments received during this period. 116 positive, or 72% were in supportive. The 28% that were had a negative response to the amendment did not provide any comments on the concerns. Next, please.
I'll note the 6:02, Dave Iverson has joined the meeting. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. And as noted on the slide, the review period ran from January 26th to February 20th. Town communication offices did help notify the public, and we had the 161 public comments that were received. Staff will request action to close the public comment period and approve amendment number 2 to the federal fiscal year 2024 to 28 transportation improvement program.
Okay. Do we have any further public comment on this amendment here tonight? Nobody with their hand raised on Zoom, right, Megan?
Let me just confirm. I'm not seeing anyone on Zoom with their hand raised.
Okay, we'll take a motion from the commissioners to close the public hearing.
Make that motion to close the public review period.
Thank you, Nat. Can we have a second? Second by Dawn. Thank you. Any further comment on the amendment for the tip from the commissioners? If not, we'll take a motion as Mike stated. Mike, do you want to repeat that other motion for me?
Sure. This is to approve amendment number 2 to the federal fiscal year 2024 to 28 transportation improvement program. Again, that amendment number 2 adds the purchase of 3 electric buses for $879,000.
Thank you, Mike. Do we have a motion?
So move to approve.
Thank you, Nat. Second. Thank you, Dawn, for seconding. Roll call vote. Seth?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
Wendy?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Nat?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And Mary, aye. Thank you all. I will turn it over to Don Holgate to open the select board meeting and the joint meeting with NPEDC.
I just have to say it's really exciting to get process going. I will call the select board meeting to order. I should do a roll call. Make sure that everybody's present. Matt B.
Here.
Brooke Moore here. Tom Dixon.
Here.
Malcolm McNabb.
Here.
Okay. And we have Libby Gibbs. And Rick Sears is online and Greg Tiffin is present. I don't know why I can't talk this evening, but so now we're going into the joint meeting. What we before we fully accept the agenda, what we talked about at the just before the meeting started was that the original purpose of this meeting was to talk about the memorandum of agreement between the select board and the NPEDC for the planning and land use services department. And we would like to move that to the beginning. And then as well for numbers 1 and 2 that I know there's a lot of public interest in. We will be taking the presentation tonight and we'll be having a public input session at a future select board meeting.
If I can make a note, the NPEDC agenda has a slightly different order of items, and just for the public's benefit, we'll be following the order of items that is in the select board agenda.
Okay.
So our apologies for not coordinating that perfectly.
Oh, I'm very record.
John, may I ask a clarifying question? So on the 2 items that we're moving, the BPAC and the funding for Four Corners, we're able to make a decision on the funding
Yes.
aspect of that, but we're not going to be talking about the design or moving the project forward at this time. It's really about the question on the agenda is releasing $100,000 of design. So if people are here to comment on the design or whether or not we're going to move forward with that rotary project, that's not really what we're talking about tonight, right?
Correct. Okay, so how do we want to begin this discussion?
Well,
On the agreement, there were some.
if you don't
suggested
mind,
amendments, yes.
sure. So item number 5 is, I think, what we're taking up right now. Review possible action with those updates to MOA between select board and NPEDC for operation planning and land use services plus department. So just to give everybody a little reminder history about this, 12 years ago is when we initiated the MOA, and it was basically in response to a kind of a staffing difficulty we were having managing the various regulatory departments in a coordinated manner through sort of one management structure. So over a period of time, we developed the MOA. It went to the planning commission, it went to the select board, and it was approved. Since then, there have been some changes in staffing, town department functions, things of that nature. And there was a request over the summer from board members, select board members, to have a discussion about the MOA. And that may have come from other things, including discussion about the Planning Commission Enabling Act. And well, so kind of fast forward to now, but a little bit back to the summer, myself, the chair, the planning director, the planning commission chair, and town council met a couple of times to go over proposed updates to the MOA, and the results of that is what's in your packet. And the planning director prepared a summary, which is in the packet as well, of what the changes are intended to reflect. And just to quickly mention what those are, the main modifications are a couple of departmental changes have occurred. The energy office is now in existence. It wasn't at the time of the MOA. The Board of Health and Health Department have not been part of this MOA in reality for quite some time. And the Affordable Housing Trust Fund wasn't in existence 12 years ago, and now it is. So there was the MOA reflects those updates. New language was added to address personnel issues related to employees subject to collective bargaining agreements. I believe you all received today a couple of emails from labor's union members questioning that language. Town council and I talked about it. That is really not an issue here. The language that is in the MOA now proposed really has nothing to do with any collective bargaining agreement. And town council could speak to that if need be. And I think other language changes relate to the planning commission's statutory functions. And that's pretty much it. Leslie, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I think the summary outlines the 5 significant changes, and the rest are all language changes and minor updates.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say is when we did this, I was around then. We were tight on money. The budget was tight at that time, and this was, so it was partly for that reason as well.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any thoughts on the proposed amendments?
Can you clarify exactly what the proposed amendment is? You mean, we have the document in the packet, there's another change to it?
No,
Okay,
no, I mean, what's
Yeah.
proposed.
okay, thank you.
I was
Yeah.
wondering if anyone wanted to discuss
Highlights.
any of
Yeah.
those items,
Yeah.
or if there were any other things that people wanted to discuss in relation to this. Brooke?
I just wanted to point out the review. I know it's another item on the agenda, but it's sort of pertinent to this is the staffing studies and the report on the changes that have already been made in staffing. The iterative process of that department and the way it functions has really changed a lot since this original agreement was drafted. So
Do we want to jump to a little discussion on number 3 and come back to 5?
it feels like it's worth reviewing that for the public, like, it is in the packet, but, just how much has changed in terms of the operation of the bus department, from those studies.
Okay.
I think it's worth that. I don't have specific comments, but I don't know whether folks read it or not, or have questions, but I just want to point it out.
So, Madam Chair, if we're jumping to 3, just to again refresh everybody's memory, in 2018, we conducted a townwide staffing study of all departments, and that's a pretty lengthy report. It's available on the town website. The Plus department was one of those, and it had a number of associated recommendations. The planning director has prepared a summary of what has and hasn't been implemented, and there was a separate plus operational and staffing review conducted several months later. And I think we have the same type of summary report. And again, over the summer, some select board members were asking for a status update of those two studies. I don't know if you want to.
I would just say that for the staffing study that was done in 2018, which is now over 5 years old, almost everything that was in that study has been completed as recommended by the consultants. And for the operational review, which also included a staffing component, most of that is ongoing. Those aren't things that you just check a box and stop. You keep doing that. So I think, the study was implemented to the extent that it could be, to the extent that it was practical. And I think, that the operations at Plus have really improved over time, especially since 2012, especially since 2018 and 19, when those studies were done, and the customer service and the effectiveness of the department have really improved a lot.
Yes.
I do have a question. The item in section development review, it's item number 4, provide guidance to boards and commissions in an effort to clarify the development process. I wasn't clear on what that meant, how it was interpreted and then to say that it wasn't practical. I think it's just worth clarification.
Okay.
Thanks.
And we had a lot of discussion with the consultant about this at the time. They really wanted us to develop a step-by-step approach to permitting, like go to HDC first, go to the Concom second, go to the zoning board third. And it doesn't work like that in the state of Massachusetts. It's not just here. We work under state laws, and applicants can go to any board in any order based on their decision-making. So for some projects, it may make sense for them to go to the HDC first and then go to, say, the Conservation Commission. Or in some cases, it may make sense for them to go get their zoning relief first before they spend time on architects. There's just no way to put together a step-by-step. You have to do it 1, 2, 3, 4 all the time. So that's why we said that wasn't practical, because it really depends on the applicant and the path that they choose.
And I think the problem that results at times is that they're shopping the answer they want. And then the other committee or the other entity they go to the HDC and get a yes, but they're not allowed to do it by someone else. And then we end up with conflicting things that sometimes end up in HDC reviews sometimes, or, well, they said it's okay. So that I think, and I remember this back in the Pagini days, that this was a goal was to try to have an overall review and simplify it. And I agree that there's been a lot of improvement in customer service. I really do. But I think that there's also a bit of an inherent conflict between the tasks that, as it's set up now, between the tasks that have to be done. I think there's an inherent conflict between, servicing, building and all those things, and potentially long-range planning. There's a conflict between servicing, building, and development, and sometimes the HTC. And I think that those conflicts seem to be falling one direction. I also think that there's an issue with enforcement. And I think that, that's listed as not practical or difficult in here. And I know that it is difficult, but I think it's part of why we as a town have an issue now with the public. The public is saying, well, it's up, you tell us that we have to call about enforcement. It's our responsibility to drop a dime when we drop a dime, and we're told that we're meddling and that we're getting in the way, and don't bother us or we'll do it later. And so I think that some of those things are things that I think, a change in the org chart, maybe not continuing with the MOU, doing it differently, could begin to address. And just like we fixed the customer service and fixed certain aspects, I think there are aspects here that could be improved upon.
I've got 2 hands up. All right, Malcolm.
Yes, I have some comments and some questions, sort of following up what Libby said about staffing issues years ago and Matt about financial. I have to be convinced that we still need this arrangement, that we still need this contract, that this MOU, is this somehow making it better for the island and better for the way we do things? I'm not convinced by that. And to me, I've always struggled, even before I was on the select board, with this whole concept of essentially outsourcing some of our major activity to someone else other than the town, other than the elected officials. There's comments in here that the planning director will report to the manager on administrative matters, but what about policy matters? And it's always a little strange to me that some key people are actually hired by the boards they support. And I know the health director's not hired by the Board of Health, but that's functioned well when that management reports to the town. It's all. So I think there's obviously improvements and people have done a lot of work on this. I'm just not convinced we need this anymore. That we can address the issue by having a more traditional management where the planning director, et cetera, reports to the town manager. Those are my thoughts. I appreciate any rebuttal or any other comments.
Joe Topham.
Thank you, Madam Chair, or chairs. I, before most of the boards all the time, and to Matt's point, you kind of look at the project case by case basis, which is most important. And I always felt, this large project. I went to the Concom. The wetland had grown, and I knew that I had to start there first. I thought that they would be the most restrictive, but I also knew there was a certain policies before the HCC. But I do have to say, when the Concom, kind of gave me some restrictions and massaged my plan, that when I did go to the HCC and I said, listen, the Concom have restricted me to do X, Y, and Z, they acknowledged that. And so one thing when I was on the Concom is that there were some members that were on the board that didn't understand kind of the ZBA's purview or what their rules and regulations, and the same goes to the HCC. And that's where I thought all the chairs should sit down, and vice chairs, and really kind of go over what policies we can streamline or understand, like, we're not going to allow this, we're not going to permit this, but as the applicant, you really kind of get an understanding of what you can and can't not get away with, but what you can and can't do. And I think that's the most important, just to know what box to check first. And I think, Leslie's correct, that it doesn't work in an order that is systematic. You have to take each project, one at a time. And the other part is, I do think this MOU, since it's been in place, since the Plus has been standing on its own, I think it's worked very well. I love that everyone is in one building. The health department was in that one building, but you can go in and you can go talk to Lauren, you can go talk to Marcus Silverstein, you can go talk to, Megan or anyone. And I think that's really important, to be in one area that you can just bounce around from department to department. I think that's been working very well. I think the question right now is, does Ms. Gibson and Ms. Snell think that their arrangement is working well? And that's something they need to address. I think as a public and someone that uses the Plus department very frequently, I think it works very well. And I have sometimes go in the town departments, and I think that they're working very well. But I just don't want to load up too much on one, on Libby's desk. I'm sure she's got enough, but I think that Ms. Snell's been doing a fantastic job, giving guidance. And I feel that since the Plus department has been moving, I think there was some pushback in some of the new implements of policies, et cetera. But I think slowly they've understood this is betterment. This is going to make the town more efficient. And there's a better way to secure files instead of, going back to the original dates of having things scanned. I think there's a real ease to this now that was very painful, a lot of red tape. And I think that a lot of that has been taken out and it's made it user friendly. And reading that report, 92 pages, the disagreement, whatever it was, that line, I found really surprising, because I've not found anything in the Plus department disagreeable. And I always felt like it was able to get an answer from someone and get better clarity on something. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, coming into Barry and then to yourself.
Doors.
Thanks.
Going in order.
Just a few things. There's like 4 key points that have kind of popped up in the process, but I will tell you, I sat through that whole bringing together of plus, and prior to that, it was like night and day, because I hate to say it, that a lot of the departments had carved out their own individual fiefdoms. And believe me, there was not a real spirit of cooperation that occurred at times. This seemed to have made it better in the process. Of course, anything like that, there's growing pains that are involved in the process. Is it perfect? But no, I think over time it has gotten radically better than where it was. One thing, and I might ask through you to Mr. P at this point, you had made a comment that somehow this is constructed into the failure of long-range planning. Did I hear that correctly?
Did I just say that?
I thought I heard you say something about long-range planning. Would you care to repeat yourself, sir?
Sometimes that they were in conflict.
Yeah, well, I think I think what's happening when I view it, I look at this sort of from a management perspective. I look at this and I think sometimes we put too much responsibility onto one person or we don't, or we put it on everybody. And in my business, if everybody is the boss, no one is. And if we put it on, because no one's held accountable, then it doesn't work. I also think that there's, I think in some ways, long-range planning has taken a hit. And I think the HDC has taken a hit. I think that not having we're going to talk about it on Wednesday, but not having someone in charge of Park and Rec, we had to bring someone back. And I agree with your points, Barry, that there was fiefdoms and I agree with that. I agree there's been improvement, but I think there's still room for improvement. And I think part of it is people being overloaded and you have to get the day-to-day done, and there's no time to deal with sort of the big picture things. And I think that, I didn't run again from the board for, NPEDC because I was disappointed. I kept saying, geez, we need to work on, let's take one topic on the master plan a month. And I kept asking for that and we didn't get to that. So I kind of said, I repositioned my own time. And so I just feel as though there's some improvements that could be made. One of the things in the Novak report was, what do they call it? The development review team with an assistant town manager as part of that. I think that would be great. I think there should be an assistant town manager, as overseeing sort of the plus part. And I think, Leslie should be overseeing the planning part in some manner. I think you could change I'm not sure which org structure we're under right now, because there's so many over the years, but the one that was in our packet on page, I think it was 60, was interesting because I think we could do a better job of operating more efficiently, I believe.
So if I can follow up, this may take a few minutes because we're into something that may be a little bit controversial here. I remember sitting through that Novak report, and I remember dealing with the people who were running it. And I would say, as one person at that time, that was one of the most highly problematic reports that I've ever seen come out. And what was even worse is the data sources they used were highly biased. And we went back and forth about that for quite some period of time, about the veracity of a lot of statements that were made in that report. That being said, I'm a little worried too about this whole thing of how long-range planning isn't being accomplished. It's a very slow process at times. I won't disagree with you on that, but it is being done. Now, if you're citing plus in particular for some of the long-range planning things, especially the Planning and Economic Development Commission, am I hearing that correct so far?
Listen.
Well, I'm just curious if I'm on the right tangent with you.
Well, you're disagreeing, so you can tell me why you disagree.
But am I on the right tangent with you about this? This is kind of centering on some of the stuff within plus.
Yeah, it's what I just
A lot
said.
of times, what I find is that some of the long-range planning efforts they take time to put together, just like we're going to talk about some of the traffic things. They take time to put together, but a lot of times, for instance, plus nor the NPEDC are the implementing body to do it. They carry it forward to whatever level it takes. And then it has to go between either to the select board or other various departments to be able to execute that decision. Now, for as long as I've sat on that board, there's a lot of hard work and energy that have gone in at times, only at the end stretch to watch another board or commission basically torpedo all that work that was done. So I'm afraid that at times, and I've been seeing this in the general public, we're being falsely assigned with the fact that long-range planning is not being executed. And I would challenge that outrightly at this point, because I don't think people know all of the dynamics involved in that process. Now, I would argue to you at this point that there are a lot of coordinated efforts to get these things done. You've got cabinet that occurs that I know the director sits on with that. Again, this is a meeting of all your major department heads under which there should be a forum under which to discuss things. When it comes time for like the planning board to deal with something, there's also coordinated review, which brings all these different philosophies together with the managers to be able to discuss and suss that out. Now, sadly, though, one of the things that and this is a lesson I learned from the very beginning of the planning board, is whenever you have a project before you that involves multiple disciplines, one thing you cannot do in this state is have one decision or one board rest on the decision of another. So with the planning board, we can't just say to an applicant, oh, that's okay, we're just going to hold everything until you get all of your decisions wrapped up from the Concom. That doesn't happen. But I will tell you unequivocally, especially when I was on that board as chair, that when people would come before us and those things were happening, they were point blank told that essentially you'll have to weather through us, and you should be understanding what has to go on with the other philosophies that you're going to have to deal with. If you're making wrong decisions or you're thinking you're going to get one board to favor another, good luck with that, because you're probably going to come back before us, and that's something that can't, if you want to, fine, but you've made that bed, you need to rest in that bed as well too. So I think from the outside world, I think it's easy to take a look at this and generalize about a lot of things about what's the most environment. But again, here we go. There are certain laws and regulations that dictate how those things flow. So I think there needs to be some underlying clarity, or at least an understanding of not just looking at the car, looking underneath the hood and seeing what's going on as well too. And I'm afraid that's what keeps getting missed here. I mean, I've got more, but I'm going to stop right there for a moment. Thank you.
Seth is next.
Oh, sorry.
And Emily Noel that has her hand up, but I want to get through board.
Thank you, Madam Chairs. So in going back to this development process or this order of permitting, I don't know about Massachusetts state law in general, but I think the fact that applicants can submit any permit in any order is technically incorrect. If you look at what I'm the NPEDC Conservation Commission representative, if you look at what the Nantucket Wetlands bylaw specifically says, it says that in order to receive a or order of conditions from the Nantucket Conservation Commission, applicants have to have either applied for or obtained all other applicable permits. So I guess applicants could just be in the application process at all the other boards, and that's technically true. They don't have to obtain the permits, but theoretically, they should at least be in the process at the same time as going through the Conservation Commission. And routinely, I would say almost always, applicants just ignore that. They ignore that clause, and even as a Conservation Commission, we just routinely ignore that clause because we understand that permitting is difficult and that it sometimes does make sense to have other boards hear applications prior to us hearing that. But that's in violation of our own bylaw. And so we do maybe not need a formal order of operations, but like Mr. Topham was saying, we definitely need better communication by the permitting bodies. And I know at the Conservation Commission level, we've asked many times over the years if we could have a ongoing regular meeting with all of the chairs of all the permitting bodies to sit down and say like, here's our regulations. We don't necessarily know all your regulations. You don't necessarily know all of ours. And there's updates to our regulations, like the Concom's going through our update right now. Can we get this meeting in place? And we've never really been able to have that meeting. I know there was some effort started. And I think that even if there's not necessarily like a definitive order, there should be, when you apply for a permit from one board, there should be some material given to applicants being like, in case you don't already know, you probably already know, but in case you don't, please apply for these other permits as well. So I do think we need more resources for the public and more resources for applicants and more interorganizational collaboration. Even if we don't need a specific order, we do need to do a lot better there. Thank you.
Just quickly before I go to that, we have been talking about getting those coordinated meetings of the different boards, and we'll resurrect that because that's something I've had on my list for a while of wanting to have that.
Thank you.
I do, but just one other point is I do actually feel like it's more collaborative now than it was when they were all separate departments.
Okay, I don't think that's what Seth
No,
was.
I'm not
He
talking
wasn't
about that
comparing, I don't
at
think he
all.
was around then.
I
It
was
like that.
I wasn't talking about pre-plus, I was just talking
Yeah.
about the fact that the 10 regulatory boards on Nantucket, I think it's 10 right now, don't always talk to each other, and some of them don't even know what the other board's regulations are. It is not their job. I mean, they didn't sign up to be on the Conservation Commission and then read the regulations of 9 other boards. It's not what they signed up for. But somebody within either town staff or in some type of collaborative way needs to be able to provide technical assistance saying like, you might be able to get this through one board, but there's no chance we'll get it through another board, so it's not even worth your time. That's going to be good government for the public too, so that we're not wasting people's time.
And I can agree with Don that this is way improved. Bobby DeCosta and I tried for close to 2 years to have a joint meeting and it never worked out. We had a couple scheduled and get canceled. And so this is, this is progress, and it's not going to be easy, but this is a good thing. So.
I didn't know this was gonna be a workshop. Because that's what it is right now, and I'm not gonna go back before 2012 and list the 3 craziest things that ever happened, that happened all at the same time, that created the need for this, that sort of put it over the, I'm not gonna bring those up, because it's not the right place. But I can tell you, it wasn't the planning department's fault that happened. I can tell you those things. Now, I just want to say that building out there, that substandard old electric company, metal, whatever, worked great. That's like the Athenaeum for what people need. And when people go out there, they get an answer. They get help and they can park. We're forgetting about the stuff was in town. I don't even know why we're arguing about like what it used to be like and separating things and all that. That is insanity. How many buildings are we gonna build? We haven't got the Island Home done yet. We've got this thing. I mean, it's like, we're not gonna have a building department building, an HDC building, and a planning building, and a zoning building, and a Concom building. That isn't gonna happen. Okay? That place is like the Athenaeum and it works. Does it need tweaking? Everything needs tweaking. Everything always needs tweaking. The long-range planning comment that Matt made, that is the new buzzword for the last 3 years that just gets thrown out there. And we got the strategic plan, we got the master plan, we got crack. We have all kinds of long-range planning that was going on a long time. Okay, we have, most of the island is unbuildable. There's only less than 3% of the land left that's buildable. I mean, we didn't even get into HDC permits for just regular building permits. We didn't get into special permits yet, but there's a bunch of different things that happen with projects that don't happen with others. if you have a lot that's can be built on, all you need is an HGC permit. You don't have to go to the planning board unless it's a secondary lot or a second dwelling or a tertiary, but what I'm saying, a primary dwelling can be built without any other boards. I mean, how many people know this stuff? Not everybody. Joe brought up a whole bunch of things, much better than me. Yeah, it probably has it all written down perfectly. I'm just taking notes. I don't think we should be talking about blowing anything up. I think we should be talking about tweaking things. Because this works out there. And I just don't understand how there's even an issue. I know what people feel. People think we're the pro-development department. That's what they think. That's why this gets so much attention from certain people. But that is not true. There's a lot of property rights in Massachusetts. People have rights, okay? What we've done to reduce ground cover and buildable land is unbelievable, but it just doesn't look like that because everything's always something's being built. So it looks like that, but we have way less buildable land today than we did in 2006. I can tell you that. And that topic is going to be coming up more as people find out how little there's actually left. So thank you for the time. I like this. We should be doing this more often, but we're definitely going to have to go on a workshop.
Madam Chair,
This is a lot of workshops talk.
Well, in the reality, there are some things that are available to people to coordinate it for themselves. And the professionals generally know.
Yeah.
How to do the steps. It's when it's the person who's a professional who's coming from off island that's not familiar with mass laws, or Nantucket specifically, or the individual homeowner has the biggest struggle and needs some extra help. But I believe the staff really does work on that with people. But there are things like before you design the house, get a wetland determination before you go for your order of conditions.
Mhm.
And then figure out what you want to build, and then go back to the Concom for the final order of conditions. Or you can get a preliminary review at the HDC if it's a big contentious project before you actually do final design and go before them. So there are tools that are there. And I think the coordinated review that I think is maybe just getting back to was a really valuable process in the past for like major commercial developments. But anyway, there's a number of people with their hands up. I'm gonna just go with.
Madam Chair, I leave soon. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, Malcolm, did you have something you needed to comment on?
Yes, I will, because unfortunately I have to leave soon. I guess no one really answered my question about, do we need the present structure? No one's saying that Plus is inefficient, but we still have essentially outsourced a major function of this government to another party. And I believe, in my view, that the planning director should report to the town manager. Unfortunately, I can't stay, but no one has also answered the question about, do we need this structure anymore? Thank you very much. We'll see you.
Okay.
I think you answered that. We got an answer.
I think you did answer it, and what I heard, if I can speak real quick, is what I hear is that, yeah, is that I'm not close enough to it and I don't understand and the public doesn't understand it. It's too confusing and that's what the answer was. I'm not sure I don't think that's the answer. That is an answer. And that's sort of, I feel like the question is, do we need it? And if we didn't do it, what would it be? If we changed it, how could we improve it? I'm not questioning all the improvements that have happened. I do think the customer service is way better, et cetera. I'm just saying, I think there are other ways to improve. And I don't think it's you've created a false dilemma, Nat, by saying that, we're claiming that we have to move everyone out of that building and how crazy it would be. That's not what any of us are saying.
There's been calls for that. That's why.
Well, there may have been, but there's no one here is saying that. If anyone thinks that we should move people out of that building, put your hand up. I think what we should be talking about is the MOU and the details of that. Anyway, I'll be quiet.
Okay, well, I'm gonna come back to you for what you specifically want changed to the MOU, but John Trudell. Oh,
John, you
can't
muted.
hear you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to be positive. For the last 30 years, I don't know how many of you often go into the Plus building, where it was 30 years ago, where it is today. If you use this, in my profession, I'm a realtor. I'm also a construction supervisor, and not only a public official. So I use that building daily, not weekly, not monthly. I rely on that building and the people in it daily. So all I can tell you is that where it was, where it is now, obviously I'm being redundant of what we've complimented, but the staff is cross-trained. They're very professional. They're polite. They're always helpful. There's rarely a line that people are waiting for and being impatient. I'm just cautious that, or trying to be cautious that we can always improve. Long-range planning, it always changes. So obviously that's going to be a target from now until the end of time. But I'm just cautious. I want to be cautious that what we have right now, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We don't want to go backwards. So in direct response to Malcolm and his question, do we need a structural change? I honestly don't think we do. We can always improve on it and add to it, but how it's being run right now from a person that goes there daily, I can't tell you how incredibly professional it is. And, just one person, I'm extremely happy and thankful that we have that as it's in place right now. That's how it's being run. Thank you.
Okay, Barry, then I'll go to the two public hands.
So just, let's have a quick little history lesson here. When I first got on the planning board eons ago, we talk about a fractured system. It was highly fractured under the aegis of when John Virginie was there, and I to this day still respect Mr. Virginie, but there was a great schism between the planning commission, planning board, and town administration. And this was well before the days where you had consolidated other departments. With a great amount of effort and time, when I finally got to be chair, I worked with Mr. Wars to try to make sure that that relationship between the town, the NPEDC were well cemented. Now, you also had an added benefit that came out of that as well, too. You had the director of the NPEDC, but what you also got is almost for free was also a director of planning as well, too. That came out of it. Those two positions were under the aegis of one person. But make no mistake, when that was happening as well, too, the effort was at that time, and I think still has continued to be to this day, to keep as close together as possible in terms of working together. Now, I kind of keep picking up this sense of it's not working together. And boy, for those people who are saying it, I would love concrete examples. I really would. I think it's easy to generalize it, but I'm going to put the challenge on the table that if you start saying that, let's get into the nitty gritty of what is not working, as opposed to a generalization, because there's the key as to what Matt said about tweaking things. And I think that's the real key behind it. So I'm going to agree with Mr. Trudell. I don't think it's time to separate these things. Maybe we need to take a little look, but let's put the cards on the table here and discuss really where things are going awry. I'm sorry, maybe I'm a little sensitive toward it as well, too. Because it seems like over the course of the past 3 years, there's been a great deal of effort in a percentage of the public out here to completely undermine the process that's going on. And that is a story unto itself, which I think right now I'm going to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily Molden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Emily Molden for the Nantucket Land and Water Council. First of all, thank you to the Select Board and the NPEDC for holding this meeting publicly and for the opportunity to engage in this conversation. I did just have a few comments that I would love to contribute, largely building on some points that have already been discussed. I think that the idea of a establishing a development review team is, I also believe, a really good recommendation and an interesting one. It could be that that's something that often takes place more sort of internally, if you will, and not necessarily in the public eye. I'm interested if there have been examples of where that's been conducted and if it's been successful. I could see that having a lot of value going forward. Also, relative to the development process, as everyone's been discussing, there definitely, I think, is a variety of ideas or opinions of how that could work and if it could work, establishing something more formally or not. But I would ask if maybe there's at least an effort, or I think it's certainly worthwhile to, again, try to make sure that all the boards and departments are aware of what's being required for a certain project. So I know, for example, I'm not sure how recently, but I think relatively recently, I believe the planning board now has a specific line item in special permit applications that asks an applicant whether their project is in wetland jurisdiction and if it requires Conservation Commission review. And I think that to have more of the boards and committees create that kind of a question so that they at least have the awareness of what else needs to be permitted on the property as they're reviewing the project is would be a step in the right direction. And then also, as far as the discussion around code compliance, I certainly understand how it's not practical to think about trying to review and enforce every permit that's ever been issued, but I do think that there's an opportunity to try to prioritize and figure out if there's a way that we can do better in certain areas. I've often wondered if there's an opportunity to utilize some type of software to help with keeping track of reporting requirements. I know that for innovative alternative septic systems, there's a specialized software over in Barnstable that's used to trigger when annual reports are supposed to be submitted. And I've often wondered if something like that could be created and utilized for stormwater infrastructure, storm scepter units, that sort of thing. So I would definitely encourage and hope that in the structure, however it moves forward, there's an opportunity to review some of that and do a little bit more in that area as well. Thank you.
Rick Atherton.
Dawn, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I would like to comment. I have a feeling this discussion is taking two sort of different tracks. One has to do with the management of the plus operating units, and I have no problem with how they're operating. I think that's fine. What I am concerned about is anytime our town or the NPEDC enter into a memorandum, or let's call it a contract, which has no termination and which cannot be changed except by mutual consent of both parties. It's sort of like a union contract with no termination clause, and both sides are locked in. I think things change over time. I don't know what might happen in the future. I think all your questions about operating and coordination are separate from the contract itself. A town planning director who happens to be paid directly by the town instead of through the NPEDC can do exactly the same management, supervision, and responsibilities that are incumbent in that position right now. I would encourage the board not to enter into contracts which have no termination and which are not subject to change by the town at its choice. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Curtis.
Thank Chris.
My turn?
Yep. I didn't see you. You're behind Tom.
Maybe you didn't do on purpose. Curtis Barnes, and I want to say that working, as John said, working with Plus is great. Going in there, they're doing a good job. You have a tremendous agenda tonight. I read it all, and I want to refer all of you to page 37 of the Novak report, which starts planning board. And following up on what Dr. McNabb said, Um, I encourage everyone to read this very carefully. And I have redlined a bunch, I'm not going to read it to you, but it says, in the last paragraph, town manager is the appointing authority for the director of planning. It also states an alternative structure for the RPA could provide both efficiency and clarity within Plus by consolidating planning functions under a single board and so on and so on and so on. I really urge you all just to read page 37, because this is a question that will be coming up with the town council study committee as we continue our discussion. That's the.
Okay. Well, tonight we have a proposal for some amendments to the existing agreement. I think that there are some thoughts about taking it further. But I'd like people to be a little bit more specific on how that would function. And what they'd be looking for, if anyone has any additional input, or, you know, is everyone okay with the changes that have been proposed? Oh, Leah Hill.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, great. My name is Leah Hill. I'm the Vice President for LiUNA Local 1060 Union. It was brought to my attention only on Friday when the packet was posted that within the proposed Plus MOA, there's a section that violates our union contract. I sent a letter to all of the select board and all the commissioners to bring this matter to everyone's attention and explain it in detail. So hopefully you were able to read that. But this matter pertaining to the proposed grievance procedure spelled out in the MOU or MOA is a subject to a collective bargaining agreement requiring our union's review and input. It was not brought up in recent negotiations, which resulted in a newly 3-year contract. The proposed change, which we only just learned of, has not been received well by our executive board, as it directly violates the grievance procedure in our new contract. We believe incorporating this particular text is premature, as there have been no initial conversations between the union and town administration regarding this matter. In addition, it should be removed or replaced with text from our union contract so that there are no inconsistencies and no violations. Again, we are not objecting to the whole agreement, only this portion of it that pertains to union matters. We're open and willing to work with all parties to develop language that does not violate our collective bargaining agreement. Thank you.
Okay, John Giorgio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have read the emails that we just received today with this claim that the MOU violates the collective bargaining agreements. And with all due respect, I really could not disagree more. I believe the language that the previous speaker is objecting to is the language that requires the director of planning, when there is a grievance filed, to respond to that grievance at the direction of the personnel director and of course the town manager. This is standard language and operating procedure in any municipal operation. It is an internal matter as between the director of planning and the town administration, which under the collective bargaining statutes represents the town with respect to collective bargaining matters. It is internal. It doesn't involve the union at all. And just think about that for a moment. If an employee files a grievance, that grievance, depending upon how it's resolved, can have significant impacts on the entire operation of a department vis-a-vis other employees. So it is wholly appropriate and I believe necessary for department heads, which is the current practice, to consult with the personnel director prior to engaging in the step one grievance process. That is standard operating procedure. It has nothing to do with the union. And so I respectfully disagree with the characterization that this MOU violates the town's collective bargaining agreements.
Thank you, John. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that point?
Can I comment on that, Dawn?
Yes, Leah.
I respectfully disagree with what John is saying. In our contract, which there was part of the grievance procedure that was reworked, I'm going to read what our current contract says. The grievant shall file the grievance in writing with the employee's department head within 15 working days after the action, which serves as the basis for the grievance. The department head, not HR, will investigate the complaint to determine its validity and shall respond in writing within 10 working days. A failure to respond in writing within 10 working days shall be deemed an unsatisfactory answer. So that's currently what's in our contract, which was not changed. So I'm not sure where he's coming from, saying that it's standard operating procedure for HR to get involved right away, which is what is now, proposed in the MOU. Thank you.
I mean, respectfully, it seems logical to me that any department head would want to notify the town manager and HR in regard to the whole process going forward, even though it's ultimately their decision on the grievance. There's a team.
Yeah, it happens all the time. It's nothing to do with the union contract, as town council said.
It's not passing the decision-making power.
It is consultation, which does not involve the union contract. All department heads always consult with human resources before acting on a grievance, and it doesn't need to be referenced like that in the union contract.
Thank you. John, did you want to make another comment? And then Dave Iverson has his hand up.
Madam Chair, no, I would, I think this is purely an internal matter for town administration. When Libby manages the union contracts, it's her prerogative to establish internal procedures as to how town departments will respond to grievances. That's wholly consistent with Chapter 150E of the general laws, and it's not a matter that is under the authority of the unions to object to.
Thank you. Dave Iverson?
Yes, with all due respect to both of the people that have spoken on this subject and to my ignorance in the process. But my question is there a reason why this paragraph wouldn't mirror the language in the union contract? And just to keep everyone on the same page. I'm not sure who I'm directing that question to, but.
I can respond to that, Dave. It is precisely because the town has an interest in keeping everyone on the same page that it should have the prerogative to establish policies with regard to how grievances should be handled. When you think about it, someone files a grievance with a department head on how leave is calculated, or how compensation is determined, those department heads are answerable to the town administration with regard to personnel employment matters, including collective bargaining matters. And you could wind up having 10 different department heads doing 10 different things without taking into consideration the policies established by the town manager with respect to how these kinds of grievances should be handled. And that's precisely because you want to keep your department heads on the same page and not have them go astray. This is not a matter for the union to get involved in. The collective bargaining agreements, as this MOU states, have specific grievance procedures written into the contracts. And yes, those have to be followed by the town, and they have to be followed by the union. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about how to ensure that personnel policies and practices, including those with union employees, are kept consistent.
Brooke? So it feels to me the addition of this provision in the agreement is to improve the tether between the Plus Department and town administration in a way that's actually positive and productive to ensure consistency in policy and how things happen. So we're talking about wanting, some people want to have the planning director report to the town manager. And this is really just tying one area of the job closer to town administration to that end. So it feels like it makes sense. It's one of these areas of making sure the connection between what's happening in Plus and what's happening in town administration is further codified and clarified in my mind. So it makes sense to me for consistency purposes. And there's some other provisions and changes in that too around compensation decisions and so forth that propose to further align the decisions made in this independent way to the general and consistent policy of town administration and our compensation structure across the entire town. So it feels like we're actually tying it closer together with some of these amendments, not the opposite.
I mean, I would imagine, can I just ask,
Yeah.
were you already doing this in practice? If there was a grievance?
I'd say it was inconsistent.
Okay. But if, say, the grievance was going to be upheld and there was financial implications, you would be doing this.
We should be.
Okay.
Can I just build on real quick what Brooke said about strengthening the reporting structure? I don't know why people find the Plus agreement to be confusing. I mean, as the director of planning, I report to the planning commission for things that are planning commission related. But for anything in the Plus agreement that's town administration related, I have to consult with Libby and I report to the town manager on that. So at least for us, I don't see what the confusion is. It's very clear to me. Commission goes to the commission, town administration goes to the town manager, and that's not anything new. That's been going on since 2012 with the prior director.
Matt?
Yeah, and I think where we get into some of it is NPEDC is evaluating the planning director and setting the pay and doing a lot of that, sometimes without consultation with Libby, sometimes in opposition to what the town is doing, or at least not asking. That's happened recently. And I know some people were not happy. I think that and I think that the NPEDC job itself needs someone who owns it. I think if you're trying to split, it into two people, having you do two things, I think is too much. I think we almost, and they're having the same issue in Boston. Boston is bringing their planning under the city of Boston because of the split they had between the regional planning, and they're seeing those issues. I think we've seen them. Barry talked about history. What he forgot was this split has been here. It's been about a 50-50, and we've seen it in some of the town meeting votes. And what he forgot when he went back into that history is he took over after half the board quit in protest. Half the NPEC quit in protest because one person missed a meeting and an action was taken that was promised that it was not going to happen, and one person missed, and that's what happened. I don't want to get too deep into it, but that has led to a lot of that began the mistrust that is still there. It's still simmering 25 years later. And you can Google it and look at the articles in the newspapers and at the time. And so to not acknowledge that, to say that everything is perfect, not acknowledge that we have some of those issues, I think is holding us back and not moving us forward. So, and I think we still haven't answered the question of Malcolm, why do we need this? I don't think we need it. If it's, we could set it up in a way that did all these things without this document. I haven't heard an overriding reason why we needed this agreement at this point.
Yeah, thank you. And respectfully on that point, I think that's not what's on the agenda. What's on the agenda is the review of the proposed update. So we want to talk about, should we get rid of the agreement in general? We need to have a separate meeting with a separate agenda item, I would say. But I do have one comment that's general about the MOA. And this is not a personalized comment to any staff that are currently here or have been in the past. But I do think that there is a potential with how the arrangement is structured, where the planning director has sort of their own kind of say in what percentage of activities should be going towards NPEDC, what percentage of activities should be going towards out of Nantucket Plus work, and kind of like is able to set their own schedule at the timing of that. And I do think in some ways having one person do both jobs could cause some constraints on the interests of the other role. I'm not saying that it necessarily has or not. This is strictly hypothetical speak here. But I think that if we were to move forward with a MOA that more specifically laid out the benchmarks for what percentage of the job should be focusing on NPEDC regional planning authority concerns, and what percentage should be focusing on town of Nantucket planning board concerns, that could be a possible way to ensure that one person can functionally and effectively engage in a role to do master planning, long-term planning, and the daily roles of the Plus department at the same time. And again, this is not a character assessment of anybody in the position, but I do think that could be a way to move forward with a process that ensures both interests are happening at the same time within the same department, within the same person. Thank you.
Dave Iverson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. A few people have called for the or have said that this just doesn't work anymore, but have not given us any specific reasons why this isn't working, other than they just feel that it's not doing the process justice, I guess, or is not contributing to good governance. But no one's really given any specific reason. So I mean, I would turn around and ask Malcolm, even though if he's not in the meeting, what doesn't work? Because it seems to be working. And is it perfect? No. Is there room for improvement? Yes. But no one's given a specific reason why this MOU shouldn't exist anymore. And I think Seth had a good point, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But without good specific reasons, I don't think we should even entertain the thought of doing away with this MOU. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I
say something? I mean, this is like, okay, I want to go back to 2012 for a second.
I was going to try and wrap this up.
I know, I want to go myself, but I just want to say something again, just a simple little Planning Commission, state agency, non-regulatory, advisory. This is one of the main reasons that this was even developed to begin with. Okay, the MOU in 2012, because it kept the separation of her hiring part versus the day-to-day. And the day-to-day stuff, and the improvements that have been made in this current document kind of does what everyone's sort of saying needs to happen. It's actually happened. I read it twice today in my truck, and it's like pretty good cleanup, okay? To fit some of the newer things that have happened over time, the energy office, the Board of Health language thing that was still stuck in there that got fixed. But there's a lot of other things that got cleaned up too, similar to what we did with a lot of the other town bylaws in the last 3.5 years or so. But if the planning director has day-to-day operations with town departments, but technically doesn't have to report to Libby, that would not work because there's too many things that cross over. But this arrangement does that. There's only a couple of things that can't happen to the planning director from the town. I think that's a pretty good separation of powers because it brings everything together that the town people need to work in one building. So that's all I have. Thank you very much for this.
Okay. Joe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with what Nat said. And in the beginning, when I spoke, I was trying to lay out examples that I thought this MOU was working very well. I don't know any reasons why. And I remember before being in the Plus department, was even created that I feel that this is a better process. I think that there is separate lanes that Libby controls and then Ms. Snell in the Plus department, but they're communicating and they're doing, meetings and they're talking. And if there's a problem, we know about it immediately. And so I don't know any reason why not to. And I think the very, very few handful that are complaining about this, I don't see what their complaint is. I think that the vast majority of people that do use the Plus department and the town department, I think they really enjoy that there is a separation and there is a clear defined lanes and guardrails that are there and each is specific to controlling that. And I think that's what's the most important, why this MOU is really valuable to the town of Nantucket. I think it was a great thing it created. And I think this contract cleanup of the work brings us relevant. And then to Rick Atherton's point, I think in 8-10 years, whatever you want to do, that we review this. If the town is starting to evolve even more, or some department is being added or something, then we meet again and we bring this up to date. And I think that that's what's most important. But my vote would be to keep this in place. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Dawn, I want to throw something in.
Yes.
So I have 2 points. First, I want to just remind everybody that the planning director provided planning services to the town, as this agreement says, since the NPEDC was founded in 1973. This agreement did not create the relationship between the planning director and the town. It simply formalized it, and it established that the purpose was for more efficient town operations. So if you want to talk about removing this agreement, you need to talk about what replaces it. Are you talking about completely removing the planning services that NPEDC and the planning director currently provide the town? If you're going to do that, then who's going to provide them? Who's going to pay for that? Are you talking about completely severing the support that the NPEDC receives from the planning department? Okay, well, who's going to pay to replicate that? But there's a lot more in his. I think Seth had a good point. If you want to talk about removing the agreement, that is a very different conversation than the conversation about modernizing the language in the agreement and updating it for the current situation. So we want to keep that in mind.
Yeah, you are correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if there is going to be a proposal for that at any time, someone needs to really bring one forth, and we'll put it on the agenda as exactly that. With some details on how it's actually going to function. I've got 4 hands up on mine. Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So
I just had a couple of brief comments, and it's not in opposition. It's just to raise what I think should be addressed, where I see tying together both the MOU, the NPDC, and town administration relates back to the earlier discussion about permit compliance. And what the Novak report highlighted in terms of that the town policy, whether written or unwritten, is to essentially take no notice of violation, and that it is completely based upon, citizen reporting. And the question becomes, it's not so much of that also, but that I sit through most planning board meetings, and I see how hard the board works and the staff to craft conditions of special permits. But then once the permit is issued, there's really no expectation of compliance or checking of that, unless really somebody complains, and it shouldn't really rely on on a citizen for that. So the question that I have with something like this is, and I've talked to the town manager and former planning director going back at least 15 years on this, and it's, well, that's a select board policy, but is it a select board policy, or is it coming out of NPDC or planning? So I guess that I think there's just a bit of a structural deficiency there, and I think that not suggesting by any means that this is to go looking for violations or that sort of thing, so much as that if you have a permit that's issued, sort of building on Ms. Molden's comments, and I understand, and I saw the packet that, you don't have, they've so many permits back to 1972, but, perhaps it's time for the town to have a compliance agent that spot checks, permits. Is someone cleaning their catch basins? Is that sort of a thing. So there is at least, there's so much good work that goes into the formulation of the conditioned approvals, but then to have no follow-up, and whose policy is it that there is no, that doesn't happen, that there's no notice, or that nobody checks it. And so I hope that with both boards sitting here together, as well as part of the MOU, that could be cleared up. Thank you.
Who does that fall to in terms of a policy decision?
I don't know if it's so much of a policy decision as something that should be happening. Code enforcement should be happening. And I think it tends to be a matter of staffing resources. Right. And unfortunately, often it is citizen reported or staff people report it, and it is followed up on.
It is. And right now we have quite a bit of enforcement going on through town council. We have an internal work group with planning, fire, Concom when needed, police, building, zoning, that talks about properties that are an issue and need group enforcement. But again, it comes down to a staffing issue. We have a high volume of permits that have to be reviewed every day. And, it's balancing going around and looking for violations and actually getting the permits processed in the statutory timeframe. I mean, I think what a lot of people forget is most of Plus operates on statutory timeframe. Mm-hmm. It's, the work isn't always something that can wait until tomorrow or wait until next week. There's a specific timeframe in which it has to be completed. And so that always has to take priority.
And how many positions do you have active?
We don't have any permanently vacant right now. But the zoning compliance coordinator is very busy reviewing permits that come into the office every day. So finding time to go out and look for violations, isn't.
Just to follow up on that, the number of permits processed in various ZBA, HTC building is huge right now. So the time available for permit compliance is difficult to find. But I also would say some of the permits that we've tackled for non-compliance or the situations are very complicated. And I can think of one in the Orange Street area, for example, that went through well over a year, probably closing in on 3 years of rather intense regulatory follow-up. So that things like that sometimes tend to take a while.
So where's the decision making on whether staffing should be beefed up for this, and whether we have the financial resources to do so? I mean, that feels like a conversation that needs to happen. It's some level. I don't know.
Right, maybe that's a good topic for the, chair meeting that we're gonna be setting up.
It is.
If people remember, it wasn't Marcus, but that position was recreated by Linda Holland at town meeting because this wasn't happening. You know, going way back, Linda Holland brought that position into place. And so I think it's, so I do think a discussion of, how do you staff more people to get some of the things that the public is asking for done is an important one.
There's 3 plans up online.
Yeah, I'll just say, I know we're trying to wrap this up and I want to sort of lead us in that direction. It feels to me as though we've done some technical amendments, some valuable policy changes, tweaks in the agreement, and that we've identified areas for further investigation. And that, to my mind, we don't throw the agreement out, but we look for more opportunities and maybe put a timeline on a review of some of these areas of concern.
Leah Hill. I'll get back to you then.
Thank you, Don. I just wanted to circle back. So the issue that the union has regarding the proposed MOU is not the consultation of HR. It's that HR has to authorize the department head for this grievance process, which the authorization by HR is the violation in our updated contract. So if that is what the town has been doing for these grievances, that's contradictory to our union contract. So I just wanted to make that clear that, again, consultation is fine. The issue is not the department head can't consult with HR about these issues. It's that the proposed language doesn't allow the department head to actually make the decision unless HR is authorized.
Right, that's the way it works. That's the way it's worked since, I don't know, day one.
Okay. I'm just going to try and get through the last 2 people who are online, and then I'm not going to take any more public comment. William?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Billy Saad. I'm a Plus employee and a member of the union. I don't represent the union. I'm just speaking on behalf of myself. And I just have one question, and that's, I don't have a grievance to file, but in the future, if I do, am I to go off the contract that I signed and I was under the impression that I signed, or am I to go off this proposed language, if approved, that I wasn't aware of? Thank you.
I don't want to really continue this on, but the union contract specifies the procedure. The language in the MOA is simply how it works internally with the planning director and town administration. If an employee has a grievance, they follow what's in the union contract.
Okay. Rick Atherton?
Dawn, thank you. Thank you again. On my concern about the termination clause, perhaps the town administration could tell us today or in some future time, how many town contracts have similar clauses where the contract cannot be modified or terminated without the express consent of both parties. And it seems to me, in the short term, you talked about being willing to review these things. You should simply add that the contract ends after 3 years and you figure it out. I'm offering a compromise. I think that's something that should happen. Otherwise, each party can't act alone, and if differences occur, both have leverage over the other party, and that is not a healthy contract for our town. It may be that John Giorgio, our town council, thinks it's just fine then maybe he recommends it to all his clients that contracts be entered into with that kind of a clause. I don't think it's healthy for either party. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that all of a sudden we went from there was no termination clauses to there's a termination clause, because there is. No question about it. So I sometimes when misfacts are spoken, they need to be addressed. And that's what I was wanting to get back to, that it is inside there. You know, the thing that we circle back onto is the whole thing behind enforcement. Having sat on the planning board, when we've got people who are against a project or an MCD that may be progressing further at this point, we'll often hear from people that there are all these problems that are associated with it, and that'll agree to this almost automatically. When you look at those same people and ask them, have they formally filed anything? It's like, no. Have you talked to even the person running the program? No. So, but they talk to their 5 best friends to get concurrence with it. And I don't know if that source of frustration was when we look at it and say, okay, great. In the future, though, we need you to go to these departments for enforcement in order to document what's going on. Otherwise, it's hearsay. And that's what we will not operate under in any way, shape, or form is hearsay with things. I don't know. Maybe it's listening part of this. Maybe it's time to hand plus back to the town. I think we took it on as a very good faith effort to try to work with the town in a highly collaborative effort. And at the time, it seemed like it made perfect sense to begin consolidating everything into one roof. And, you know, I'm hearing from certain people today that there seems to be a penalty associated with it, but that's my thing. And Matt, one thing I want to say to you is that maybe your recollection of 25 years ago and actions I may have taken and my recollection are 2 different things, but in that time, if it was problematic, you've never talked to me about it. I think you picked up information through other channels and other sources, and that's okay. But I would begin to want to question the veracity of what went on. I think with anything, you need to be able to take on both sides of the equation. You know, that to me is how I like to approach things. If I'm hearing one side of disagreement, then maybe the other side can convince me otherwise. I know that's worked very effectively. Sitting on the board in the past, people convinced me at the last minute. It's like, oh my God. So I would really appreciate that conversation and just like to get that out there. By the way, it wasn't Linda Hall, it was Norm Shalecki who put Marcus on the board.
All right. Well, thank you. I knew it was from outside.
I just remember that. So yeah.
I didn't claim that you did it, Barry. I said.
Well, it's kind of, all right.
Can we not do
Yeah.
this?
Right. And I'm just,
Through May?
yeah, thank you. I'm just wanting to make sure that we can talk.
Yeah, no, we can anytime.
Please. Thank you. Sorry, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and I hope this is the most boring comment of the night, but my initial comment here is that there is a clause here that says the agreement will, a complete review of the agreement will be undertaken from time to time. And I think that's technically insufficient. I think it should say at least once every 3 years or additionally as needed, so that we have a regular review of this process. Now, this is a 12-year-old agreement we're talking about that seems like may have never been updated, or maybe it was discussed in 2018, 2019, but let's just get this on the agenda every 3 years to discuss some of these things as they come up and as the departments develop, so that 12 years from now, we're not in another crazy situation like this. Thank you.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say 5, but whatever.
5 is fine.
Whatever anyone thinks is fine. That's actually a really good point.
Some standard number is.
Yeah. Okay. Madam Chair, I want to provide some calming, a little calming. One of the bigger, I think, to Rick mentioned the stuff he's mentioning, mutual respect is a big part of this agreement. And professional services, I think Libby brought that up earlier. There is so much cross stuff that goes on. Town needs things, the town. Well, we're all the town. Okay, it's just these state agency things. Land bank, land commission, and the other one. Jesus. And then we have the enterprise accounts. You know, we have a lot of stuff, but we're a lot better than the vineyard, I can tell you that. Can't get anything done over there. So they need a lot of trailers over there for a lot of it. So this agreement was to kind of codify, I think somebody else said that over here tonight. To not codify, but sort of get this all officially set up. It was already happening in a lot of ways. All the things with the yard sale, the paper streets, the real estate matters. Now we have a real estate person. We never had that then. It was Andrew doing it kind of by himself with other people. And we need people that know what they're doing. I'm just going to come out and say it. Sounds like the 60s. You got to kind of know what you're doing. And it's a lot better to have one or two chefs and a whole bunch of chefs. So this, whatever this agreement means to people, this agreement formalized, there's the word I was looking for, formalized what was already going on in a collaborative way with mutual respect. And I think there's a lot of good guardrails in here that keep some of the things that people are concerned with are there. Leslie reports to the town manager for day-to-day operations. You can't hire a cleaning lady out there without getting in touch with the town. So I'm just saying, it's not doing whatever you want. Okay, so thank you very much.
So what's the, what
What are we gonna
is
do?
the purpose of tonight? I mean, we're looking for a motion to adopt the amended.
The
version.
amended, and I mean, I think maybe we could accept a friendly amendment to have a specific number of years before a review is done again.
Okay,
So or something along the lines of, you know, somewhere between 3 and 5, or it has to be reviewed.
I mean, it's a standard amount of time. I don't have a concern with that.
I think 3 is really fast.
Yeah.
When you take, it
When it's
takes a
been
while.
well,
Yes.
It's five is fine. It's not a problem.
But here's, I'll question a little bit. So 3 years, but the review should be now, but we're not having the review. We're talking about the changes. And when we've got into the weeds a little bit on some of the issues, it's like, oh no, let's go back to the MOU. I have to correct something earlier. These services provided by the planning director were happening before this would happen. And if this disappeared, they'd still be happening because that's the focus of that job. And so, you know, what this really did is it offsourced, you know, a bunch of other departments to be overseen by somebody else. And I think that's what this did. And that is what needs to be reviewed. And and some of the various departments have been reviewed and it's been changed. You know, and we've moved Board of Health out and the real estate went elsewhere, et cetera. So some of that has happened, you know, partly for different reasons. You know, everyone was different reasons. You don't have to get into all of that. So I think that review should happen sooner than 3 years or 5 years. I think that review should happen soon.
So the review that brought forth these changes was myself, Mary, Leslie, Libby, and town council sat down to update the agreement.
Yes.
It is it's a different discussion, and I knew some of that would come up tonight on whether the agreement would be rescinded or, you know, changed dramatically. If that is going to happen, we need a concrete proposal on how that's going to function from someone. I'm not looking for that to happen, so it's not going to come from me. These were appropriate changes that made sense to continue, for it to continue to function the way it has been functioning, which has had many benefits to the community. Yes, there is always room for improvement. And yes, I do think that it should be reviewed on a regular schedule. And, you know, maybe there does come a time where it makes sense for this not to be the agreement. But I think at that point, there would need to be a new structure. There would have to be 2 town managers to oversee it all. That's almost what we've gotten here, is we've gotten kind of a third assistant town manager
Well,
that
and-
oversees this side of things.
Yeah.
And that's not, and maybe there is a way to structure it that way, but that is gonna take a lot more than anything we're gonna do tonight.
No, and I'm not suggesting doing it tonight, but Don, that's exactly what could happen. You know, that is exactly, you could take, you know, an assistant town manager and put them over there in charge of certain aspects and split it, and you'd get more horsepower. I mean, there is.
Does that make sense for the community's needs? And there is also a deputy director of planning, that position wasn't there before. But,
Yeah, and that's the review, I think, that if we want to streamline and become efficient and get some of these other things done, I think we need to do that. And I think that's what people are asking for. And I think that is,
well, I need
So-
people to be a little bit more specific on what needs are not being met. And a proposal on how that's gonna function.
Yeah, that's a process question.
Yes.
Apart from the fact that it's difficult to schedule joint meetings between our boards, is there anything like that's statutorily requiring us to accept this tonight, or is it just we want to move forward? Right.
No, I mean, there's the existing agreements in place. There are some things in here that are definitely appropriate in terms of current function.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm prepared to make a motion that we adopt the amended agreement, subject to the revision that it would be reviewed in 3 years by a committee of the NPEDC chair, the select board chair, the town manager, and the planning director. At 3 years.
Every 3 years?
Mhm.
You don't like the 5, right?
I like the idea of, it doesn't have to result in change, but enough has changed and is changing, and we've got a town council study committee that I think that it is worth saying, every 3 years, that group has to sit down and say, okay, should we spend time on this now? They might just decide not to, but that's what I'm proposing in my motion.
Well, I
makes
don't have
sense.
consultants. I'm fine with that.
Madam Chair, if I may make a
Yes,
friendly,
Bob?
may I suggest a friendly amendment to Brooks' motion? I think it should be a minimum of 3 years. Or you
Yes.
could say a minimum of 5 years. That doesn't hamstring you from reviewing this. If, you know, if the parties decide something's not working next year, you want to be able to sit down and have a review. So I would say a minimum of whatever you want to do, 3 or 5 years.
I like 3
That was
years.
my original language.
Yeah, I like 3 years.
Okay, and at 3 years, you could always decide to change it to 5 years.
Okay, going.
Okay, thank you.
But
For your input.
I'm just gonna say right now, you're gonna come to a conclusion and I'm gonna be premature. I'm gonna say no to this. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
Okay.
Can we
Yeah.
cross
Well,
committee? Do you need a second from the select board? And then we need to do our own motion?
we probably
Oh,
should,
yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
yes, you're
Yeah.
correct.
So you make your motion, have someone
Is there a second from the select board?
second.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call, Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Tom Dixon.
Aye.
Matt Fake.
no,
John Holgate, aye. That carries 3-1.
Okay, do we have a motion from the NPEDC with the same language as Brooke's motion?
So
Or potentially, okay, do we have a second for that? Like that? Any discussion on that before we vote? Okay, John Giorgio, you have your hand up, by the way. I don't know if that's.
I'm
intentional.
sorry about that.
Yeah. Roll call vote, Seth,
Aye.
Dawn,
I'm gonna abstain since
Yeah.
I already voted.
Wendy,
Aye.
Dave,
Sorry.
Dave, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Nat,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
John? Is John still here?
Aye.
And Mary Longacre, aye.
And
No, Barry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Barry, I thought you
I
left. Thank you,
acknowledge
Barry.
your.
Yeah.
Say nay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Barry.
everyone.
Thank you, Barry.
Okay. Chef, do we need to discuss number 3 at all? We did sort of incorporate that into this. Before I jump back to number 1.
Okay.
Did we're generally covered on that in terms of anybody's question?
Yeah.
So let's go back to number 1 and turn it over to Mike, right?
It's hotter in here, Mike, since the last time we were up here. Waste that energy.
Are we a President Williams?
Solar panels or?
Sure, it's fine.
Am I in the right item?
I would like to try Pleasant Street,
Oh,
Williams.
Yeah, that's good.
This is for the full screen though, like control dollars.
Is that a plus minus at the top? It says
We got a
50%.
plus minus. There's too many moving parts, Mike,
Yeah.
to kind of enable something like that, so.
Maybe full screen.
I don't know what makes sense. Come on. I swear this is not my first rodeo.
I'll just let you scroll as I say next. I won't necessarily wait for you to get to it if that's all right. And this take about 5 minutes for the chairs. So just I'll read through this. Again, this is related to a bike pedestrian advisory committee recommendation for bike and pedestrian improvements on Pleasant Street and Williams Lane. The preliminary design agreement with Beta Group was to look at 2 alternatives for accommodating all modes along the corridor, which was to include a one-way traffic flow alternative as proposed in the Mid-Island Area Plan and subsequent traffic study that was done some years ago. The design alternatives are online, and I'll briefly summarize those. Under the existing two-way traffic flow, I keep it there. Under the existing two-way traffic flow, conditions are preserved. It does provide a sidewalk for pedestrians to have a separate facility, but not bicyclists. Utility, property, and construction costs are greater with a two-way traffic flow option. Under the proposed one-way traffic flow condition, vehicle circulation would be restricted and would add delay to the already overburdened Four Corners intersections. However, that alternative does better accommodate all users with minimal impact to properties, utilities, and results in less construction cost. An aerial photograph of the corridors on the left-hand side of this slide, along with numbered locations that correspond to proposed cross sections, which is on the right-hand side. Under alternative 1, again, I mentioned a 5-foot sidewalk is going to be provided along the southwest side of Pleasant Street for most of the corridor and provide angled parking and a sidewalk along the northeast side of Pleasant Street between West Creek Road and Dave Street. Next, please. And this section of Pleasant Street between Williams Lane and Five Corners would retain the two-way traffic flow, and the proposed sidewalk would be located next to the roadway. Closer to Williams Lane, it should be noted that there are right-of-way impacts that would require permanent easements. That's shown here in the light blue or the cayenne on the slide. The value of this easement has not been appraised, but we do know it's about 1,100 square feet of permanent easement, not including temporary. The section closer to Five Corners does have sufficient area for construction of a sidewalk that is much more accessible and without requiring permanent easements. Next, please. Further south, near the Phelan property, there is not sufficient width in the road, and there will need to be an easement, and there would need to be some removing and replacing of trees. Next, please. That's shown conceptually here, and this rendering that was done. We tried to replicate the trees as best as possible. At least the consultants tried to, so I hope you appreciate the effort. Next, please. In the lower Pleasant Street section where angled parking is proposed, there are utility and property impacts highlighted in blue. The design accommodates pedestrian traffic and improves safety by shortening the distances of crosswalks, and it increases parking supply for abutting commercial properties. There's also an improved aesthetic, which was key to the vision of the Mid-Island Area Plan to create a Main Street type environment. Next, please. Alternative 2. seeks to better accommodate bicycle and pedestrian traffic by repurposing the southbound lane for all for those users. Two options for alternative two are shown here, a path option and a bike lane option. A path option is preferred and was shared with the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee and as part of the one-way pilot recommendation. The bike lane option was developed just for comparison and may be a better option for the lower Pleasant Street section where the angled parking is located. The next set of renderings provide conceptualized visuals of the path and lane options for the southbound lane. Next one, the path option would keep the northbound lane in its existing location. And this option also is currently proposed for the one-way pilot. The next option, the bike lane option, would center the northbound lane in the middle of the pavement area and provide separate bike flows on either side of the roadway. Next, please. Near the Phelan property and Pleasant Street intersection, the path would avoid impacts to the trees in the property. You can see the existing trees that are there right now. Next is the bike lane option. Again, there's no clear or comfortable accommodation for pedestrians along this section, but it would provide, pedestrians would need to share this area with the cyclists along those 5-foot usable shoulders. Next, please. The lower Pleasant Street section does have conflicts between the path option and the parallel parking on the south side of Pleasant Street. There are additional design options for lower Pleasant Street, as I had mentioned. That's not being reviewed here, but I'll just note that this option is proposed for the one-way pilot program, although the permanent recommendation does look at other design options. For Williams Lane, the same two alternatives were developed for this. Alternative one would preserve the two-way traffic flow. Next, please. Williams Lane would be reconstructed to add a 5-foot wide sidewalk along the north side of Williams Lane. And as with Pleasant Street Alternative one, reconstruction of the road with a sidewalk would create property impacts and require permanent easements on both sides of the roadway. Next, please. The second alternative, the one-way configuration alternative, would also reconstruct and widen the road. The westbound lane to Sparks Avenue would be repurposed as a 8-foot wide path for walking and biking without requiring permanent easements. And there was a rendering done for this option as well. Alternative two would impact vehicular traffic flow. However, it would better accommodate all modes and do so without property impacts. Next, please, regarding the costs, preserving the two-way traffic flow option for both options, both alternative one options, is slightly more expensive in material costs and would also have additional costs that would need to be funded for the right-of-way acquisitions, and those have been summarized at the bottom of the table there. Pardon the smaller font. Besides cost, traffic flow impacts were discussed definitely in more detail at Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and Joe Topping could probably elaborate on how fun those conversations were. However, the greatest concern after looking at all of those impacts and options, the greatest impact was the added delay to the already overburdened Four Corners intersection. Alternative one would preserve conditions. Alternative two would add significant delay to the Atlantic Avenue and Prospect Street approaches. And to wrap all this up, Madam Chairs, BPAC did make a recommendation for piloting the one-way alternatives. And if deemed not viable, then pursue the design alternatives for two-way traffic flow based on public input that we received during our visioning and prioritization survey this past summer. Respondents did tell us that prioritizing investments, the paths ought to be prioritized as an investment type. The respondents did support accommodating all transportation modes and users as described in the town's complete streets policy, and creating more space for walking and biking was the #1 capacity improvement that was selected by respondents. However, that's tempered by what we heard as the #1 transportation concern on the island, which is traffic congestion. All that said, the requested action is to recommend, as you know, Madam Chair, recommend to the select board that they conduct a piloting of the one-way alternatives for Pleasant Street and Williams Lane, and if deemed not viable, then pursue design alternatives for the two-way traffic flow along those two roadways. Did I do that in 5 minutes?
For that.
As fast as I could.
So I think we were going with presenting this tonight and then taking it up at a future select board meeting.
Sure.
To make a decision.
Yeah, we got a ton of info, people coming already on it.
Yeah.
I'm directing them all to you, Mike, just so you know.
When will there be public comment?
At the select board.
Okay, before you vote.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
The Phalens are willing to work with the town. I know that. Yeah, so. Yes, well, I heard from someone who spoke to them today and someone should reach out to them. They are willing to do what needs to be done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we doing any talking about this right now,
I
or just?
prefer that we don't.
No, I just didn't know, that's all.
Because
I'll-
I think that we need to
leave it
take the
alone.
public input at
Yeah.
the same time as we talk about it.
I just want to say thank you to Michael Burns for bringing me out to the gangplank with him. You always do it
Well,
every time, Mike.
we don't need to talk tonight, Joe.
Are we gonna rename it Joe Topham
I think you should.
Road? Yeah,
Just let everyone know that it's Joe's idea and that's.
okay.
This has been actually discussed for a while. Isn't it?
It is not new, however, having a formal presentation
Yeah.
and alternatives to review and have people respond to is new.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that we're at this stage, not just ideating.
And there may have to be things that go hand in hand or none of it happens.
Right.
I'm sure. Don,
Yeah.
may I just say thank you for dealing with this. My family's lived on Back Street since 1982, and we know it's, and I just want to say, of all this, it's the pedestrians that are most at risk. It's, and putting the pedestrians with bicycles doesn't seem to make sense to me, but we can talk about that later.
Okay.
But thank you for dealing.
Yeah,
with this.
and we have known for a very long time that
Yeah.
that sidewalk is really necessary.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous. It's the best way to get out of it. It's frustrating. Yes.
Just a question for you to the chair of the NPEDC. Mary, will the commission be weighing in on this at some point before that comes to our hearing?
You meet weekly, so I think it's more likely that you'll get to it before we do. But certainly we can coordinate
We'll
something.
invite the commission
Yeah.
members to join.
Posted.
Yeah, we'll invite you as an additional meeting. Number 2.
It's,
Four Corners.
or is that Libby handling this one? Or?
Oh, well, actually, this item is on the agenda because we've been doing our annual sweep of unexpended prior year capital articles to see what we can reappropriate to help fund other capital items. This item has been dormant for at least 4 years. And so we were asking Mike as part of our usual procedure, can we reappropriate this? And he suggested that be a decision by the select board and the planning commission. So that's why it's on the agenda. And we did get some comment on that as well today and yesterday, maybe. So I mean, I don't know if it's $109,000. I think we'd like to reappropriate it since it's been dormant for some time. It's not really a seemingly high priority project like many others are. And I'm not even sure the resources are really there to get it kind of resurrected. And there's also some, I'm going to call it standing opposition to it. Not that is a total barrier, but it has been. So
Wasn't there a vote against some of the land? Didn't the school take some land back or something too?
Well, if I may, Madam Chair, Libby, would you clarify whether a decision tonight on the allocation of the funding has any direct impact on the potential for the project to move forward?
The project could still move forward. It would require a new appropriation at a later time, but it doesn't close out the project forever or anything like that.
But do we need some design work done to present alternatives like what you just did.
So that's the right question.
Yeah, I mean, I can go and just quick, I got 4 bullet points of just history on this. I mean, the contract was awarded with VHB in February 2018. A preferred alternative was approved by the select board, October 24th, 2018.
Yeah, I remember.
The property acquisitions went all through 2019. I left after the end of 2019. And I think that's the last bill I found processed in our accounts. So there just really was a dearth of project managers on island that could handle this project. So I think that's why it's going to lay dormant. The VHB's contract did expire during that time frame. They didn't finish the work that they were contracted for. They were only supposed to develop, one, the alternatives analysis, which resulted in the preferred alternative of the roundabout. But they're also to do a preliminary design plan, what we call a 25% design submission, which would actually get you a cost of actually doing the project, actually implementing the project, get you a preliminary design cost estimate for building. And they haven't provided that. They've never got to that point.
Okay, so that would be the next step. To not only understand what the preferred design was of the prior select board constitution, now how much it would cost to put it in place. Which seems it would be which seems that would be valuable. Brooke?
I don't know. I feel like we invest a lot of money in projects that have vocal opposition in the community. I mean, whether or not I believe that a roundabout at this location makes sense, ultimately the voters have to approve funding it. And this feels like a controversial enough project that $100,000 might be better utilized somewhere else. That's less controversial. That is a lot.
Yeah, thank you. I think to Mike's point, if there's a contract that the consultant didn't meet the obligations of, we should require them to meet their obligations or to return the sums of money that they didn't meet. But in terms of this $109,000, I mean, it was allocated, what, 6 years ago at this point? It's probably not even sufficient to do the study that we needed to anyway. So I would just, on the basis of strictly that, not even on the basis of the project specifics, just say we should reallocate the money and then seek a reasonable appropriation that will actually fund the project later if we decide to move forward. Because if we just keep the money there, we're going to have to request a supplemental authorization anyways, and that just seems pointless to me.
Yeah, most likely.
I'd much rather always use money that we already have than go out and look for more if we need it. So I'm happy with reappropriating the money.
Now,
I just, yeah, I mean, you know, this has been going on since 2003. I just want to make sure everyone knows that this is not something new. This is the first roundabout discussion on the Nantucket Island. But the first one was built in 2007 at Stockton Avenue Post Office. The real roundabout, not the rotary. That was not a roundabout. And we had the Old South Corridor study done in 18. Was it 18 and 19? Like, I don't know. So it was before COVID. I just can't tell you, exactly. And they are the ones that came up with they came up with a couple roundabout things were plugged into that, including the No Bay Farm one. And that's the first time I ever heard that brought up with them, with Beta, right? Beta. Data. Okay. So roundabouts work, but this community takes time to absorb things that they originally don't want, like First Way, which there was practically a nuclear power protest to stop that from happening for 20 years, maybe longer. And now everyone loves it and nobody remembers the fight against First Way. That roundabout at the school should happen. The $109,000 we spend by noontime, I don't care what we do with that. I put it to something else, that's fine, as long as it doesn't kill the project, because the land acquisition stuff at the hospital and that flipping of that 40-foot unnamed way to get that hospital built in the way they had to build it and flipping the building like that. People don't know how important this stuff was to do, and we got a lot from them to give them that land. Same with Bartlett, with Poets Corner, getting that land on that corner was huge, and it was done by good citizens did that, made that happen, good relationships. I don't want these things to be just dropped like it never happened. No long-range planning took place. So I'm okay with the money going to something else, as long as these projects don't go away. That's all I care
You don't
about.
want the vote tonight to
Right.
say we're done
Yep.
with that.
We need
And I
roundabouts.
will say there's some very vocal people in favor of this, that couple that was sitting where Curtis is now. They live right at that corner
that's good.
and they very, very much want this water roundabout there.
They would recall its house.
Um,
Yeah.
but, yeah, I know it's not enough money, but I also, does it make more sense to reappropriate it with advisement to go for the supplement of what it's really gonna cost?
Madam Chair, if I could, can I just say that I don't know that it's not enough money? When there was $75,000 left in the contract, there's 109 left in the account, so we had some flexibility to absorb some additional costs. If it's worth the effort, I'm happy to go recircle back with VHB to see if they can finish out their job with $100,000 or not.
And can you remind me, did we look at turning lane options?
Correct. Yeah, all the different options we kind of looked at. Again, this is.
Yeah, I'm just trying, it's
this is
been
kind
a
of what-
while.
Yeah, you're telling me. It's that was the Creed rose at the top. That was the winner, the roundabout option. And there was a few different shapes of roundabouts, if you might recall, the peanut and the avocado and
Forgot about the avocado.
but that's what transpired. I mean, that's what the summer of 2018 was just to look at all those different alternatives. And as I mentioned, in October, we selected the roundabout option.
I think the split, there was one that showed, it was very close to what the guy sent us an email today. And I think the split was opposed by the school because it would have made two crossings. People would have had to cross the split where cars wouldn't stop. They'd be going through. And then kids would still have to cross again at the roundabout. So I think when we talked about it, we adopted the one Mike showed because there'd be one set of crossings.
It's a split, you mean the driveway?
Well, yeah, there was one that had, as you're coming past the school, there was a slip lane, so you could take a right.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and someone sent a picture of that. And that what was the concern with that is people wouldn't be slowing down and the kids still have to cross them and then they get to the roundabout. And so I think that's why that one didn't.
Right.
Progress.
Right.
I would prefer to reappropriate the money and ask for more if we need it and maybe try and move forward with what you have, because
And we also
I
have
do
to say-
worry that regardless of what we say tonight, by not reappropriating it, it's gonna kind of look like we don't want it to go forward.
So by reappropriating, you mean leaving it where it is?
Yeah.
Not
Not reappropriating.
Oh.
Just
Okay.
Yeah.
putting it backward.
Preserving it for its intended purpose.
Recommitting is what I'm saying.
the funding to the project. Oh,
Do you need a motion?
And this is a select board vote only, I'm assuming. It's not some NPEDC vote.
I mean, you guys.
Yeah. Well, you can, we've talked.
I'll make a motion that we take no action with the understanding that Mike will look into whether that money plus the 75 will finish it and get back to us.
For a second,
I'll second that.
okay. All those in favor by. I don't need to do roll.
Yeah.
Call, so that's great. All those in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Very unanimous. Okay, last up is the vision statement. Mary, that we wanna.
Yeah. So, as I hope you're all aware, the NPEDC has been reviewing all of its foundational documents, sort of in the spirit of the 50th anniversary, which was last year. And one of the things that I want to preface this is by saying that I'm extremely happy to see that planning has really infiltrated all of the town departments. It's not the proprietary concern of the NPEDC to do planning for the town. And seeing that, I think the NPEDC wants to say, where is our energy best used? And there was a focus on looking at the regional impacts of the NPEDC. Certainly the difference from 50 years ago to today is that Nantucket is much more connected to the outside world. And the other focus is that the select board now has a strategic plan. And I think that the NPEDC would want to support those efforts and not actively try and duplicate or contradict the things that are in that strategic plan as a general rule. And so we've had quite a bit of discussion and developed a vision and mission statement and some objectives. Those are included in the packet. And we wanted to bring those to the select board for review and comment. These are draft form right now. They have not been voted on. They're not final. So there's definitely an opportunity for input in this regard. I'm going to ask that I don't read them. They're in the packet. Hopefully they're available to everybody. But we'd like to open it up for comment from the select board members in particular. Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I appreciate the inclusion of the demographics, please, and the diversity of the community, because I think representation and decision making across all of it and is really important. And community engagement, you know, as a defined goal or purposes is great, because I think that's what people are clamoring for is the ability to participate, whether or not they avail themselves of the opportunities. Making sure that the opportunities are there is really important. So I appreciate that very much. So
Yeah, I think the gathering and maintaining related data, I think that's, which is already happens, but that's a key thing. I'm glad that's there. And I agree with Brooke about engagement. You know.
I really like the, in addition, the economic development portion.
Yeah.
Where it really talks about kind of sustaining a more diverse business economy.
Kind of defining it. That's always been like this big issue that people bring up, like we don't need that.
Right.
But this kind of cleans that up and makes it more focused on
That's
what
what I
the
like
reality
to,
is.
not taking it out, but saying it could be better if we could tip more things in this direction.
it also, when I think about the future of Nantucket, you know, 3% undeveloped land, there's a certain amount of underdeveloped land. At some point, construction of more is not going to be an option. And so what does our economy look like when that piece of it? It's not that it won't go away. There'll be expansion, there'll be renovation, but the pace of it might change. And so making sure that we have a sustainable economy that supports a solid year-round community that can live and work and be vital is really important.
I thought what she just said, Leslie, can I just tie you into this?
Maybe.
Well, what Brooke is talking about is stuff that and this is using this opportunity to talk about how different boards and different areas of things affect others, okay? Home occupancy is something that we talk about all the time. Of upping what you can do in your house and your own properties. People aren't going to be able to like go to their commercial property to have a business anymore. Like I'm talking about, there's a lot of new, you can have a hair salon anywhere. You can have children's daycare. You can have horses on Union Street, technically, even though I don't agree with that. We did vote for that. Okay. But there's going to be more of that on where you live. There's going to be more of it. And that's some of the things that we talk about planning, the town meeting articles, the little tweaking and stuff in these little zoning cleanups. And so there is a lot of crossover. The development of the economy here is always evolving and causes a lot of arguing, but it is evolving. And I'm glad that we finally fixed this economic development snafu that always gets brought up. Why don't we care about that? Well, it's just the way the name is, but now we've defined it a little bit. So, thank you.
In my sense on economic development, at this point, it's tied to housing. If we don't have housing, our economic development of any kind is shot. And I think that's what you're seeing with restaurants, you know, having to close a day or two a week, peak summer. You know, I think that's, so was there any discussion of housing as a head in this?
So that, I think would be covered by the fact that we don't want to duplicate what's already happening. The town has a tremendous housing department, which actually started within the Plus department and was broken out as it grew. And so there's no need for us to do the same work. Certainly, we want to be aware of it and well informed by it, but I think, you know, we don't want to duplicate what you're already doing.
I think it's a top, my suggestion would be to put support for it in there or something. It's such a top priority.
In there in public service.
All right, then, all right, I missed it.
The spectrum of housing needs.
All right, good. Then
We talked
I'm
about
good.
this for
Yeah.
a while.
That's great. It is in there, yeah.
And was there any discussion of carrying capacity? Which I know is, I know Nat's gonna love it, but
Definitely a bone on that one.
yeah, I know. You and I have had it, but was there any discussion of that? I think that's something that has been brought up for 10 or 20 years. And what is the impact? You know, and we're having it, you know, we'll pick on the airport, we're having it now with the runway. You know, and they say, well, that's our charge. Okay, so unlimited demand to the airport, we'll build unlimited runways, is that the goal? Or is there somewhere else, you know, I understand needing to service people, but is there, where do we as a community have those discussions? And I think, well, we're having it here. Yeah, but we're having it here, but I think, you know, where do we have that? And I think that's important to have.
Yeah, on that topic. We had Cessnas zipping over my heads every 2 seconds, not too long ago. I know Seth wasn't here. But that's what it was like. I mean, it was unbelievable. No airplane, no stickers get printed out of it. Okay? So those jets coming in, I'm bringing cars, the cars for those jets, those houses are already parked in garage.
They're already here.
They're already here.
And every house that was built adds 2.3 of
They're
them.
not clogging the boat, coming here every spring and early summer. Making room for other stuff, because we're not increasing the service to Hyannis, well, a little teensy bit, but not in any large amount. So that's part of the change. We had jets when we were kids back, we'd go out and watch them on Sunday night, and that was the last jet. There was like a couple, that was it. This is completely different now, and that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just natural, okay?
Well, we
as
said,
far as the housing though, I want to just say something about that doesn't get any press. It doesn't get any news. We have 2 covenants now allowed on a lot of lots, can have 2. We just recently had a public hearing on an article that's going to be a town meeting that we're trying to talk about a bonus covenant. Other options, there's going to be discussions about things like this, deed restricted agreements to be made by people, like possibly ground cover increases for deed restriction houses. These things are coming. We should have done this 25 years ago, but who would have thought of it? Nobody in a million years could have thought of something like this. So we are behind, but that's because no one came up with any of these things back in the day. There's going to be a lot of infill. So these kind of discussions are going to come up. Hopefully we can have more of these meetings to talk about this, whether it be this format or the one we had before with HDC, I think was really good too, because we need to have these conversations. Nobody watches our meetings, but just the planning commission, nobody watches them. Mary was the only person in the audience when we were live. So back before COVID, I mean, there's just nobody does it, but this meeting people watch because it's a select board meeting. And that's how we can get more information out there that nobody's like asleep at the switch. It's just that you have to react, Matt. And unfortunately, that's just part of planning is reacting. It just is. It isn't really a way to plan ahead to that level. And there was no provisions for a fast ferry and they built the terminal in 96.
No, but there are times where we have looked ahead, one being the size of cruise ships.
Well.
And but I understand, but we could.
Water, Matt takes care of that.
Well, yes and no. There were people that, after we made that rule, there were people that applied and they were not able to do it. But we as a community said, do we want a large cruise ship as big as can fit coming in here and overwhelming our downtown and overwhelming the experience like happens on a lot of islands? And we said no. And so that's an example of being proactive along the carriage capacity line that I think we need to do more of. Because we're gonna ruin the experience for everyone that's here at peak if we're not careful. And we will, if you have a hit you have a hit on Broadway, you run it longer. You don't like bring it to Shea Stadium and have 1 million people watch it. You just run the thing longer and longer. That's what Nantucket is. And if we think that we can, be unlimited and be everything to everybody, I think the economy is going to whack us.
We limit ourselves.
Well, but we need to talk about it in order to do that. That's my only point. Thank you.
Tom and then Dave.
Sure, yeah, just to pull on the thread that Matt was talking about and then Nat expanded upon and said a lot of what I was going to say is that in affordable housing, there's so much going on. We've been fighting for the transfer free bill for 10 years now. And the rest of the Commonwealth is caught up with a lot of this stuff because they're dealing with their own housing crisis everywhere from Boston to the Outer Cape, where Senator Sears from. We are just so far out on the outlier scale with AMI and all those things.
Yeah.
But some of this, the governor's bond bill and the provisions in it are exciting from the housing perspective, but they may change some of these conversations to what Nat was saying. And if they do come and where the economic conditions change and tourism flows and et cetera, all the things that make up Nantucket, that these kind of meetings, I agree with Nat, are very important for the NP and EDC Select Board, Affordable Housing Trust to be on the kind of the same page thinking about long term. So I think that's a really, both your points are really right on, just coming from the Affordable Housing Trust hat or whatever.
Dave Iverson and then Seth.
Yeah, just a quick comment or concern about Matt's ask about a carrying capacity. My concern with that is that knife cuts both ways, and we pay a lot of money to get a carrying capacity study done, and it comes back and shows that, oh my God, we can carry a lot more than we thought. I think that is I think a danger that scares me greatly. So I just wanted to add that in. Thank you.
Can I clarify? I wasn't suggesting we need a study of it, but what I'm saying is we need, as a community, need to think about it. We aren't bringing, we're a few cars away, a few thousand cars away from gridlock. People keep asking me, when are we going to do paid parking? When are we going to do this and that? And I say, it's going to happen in a couple of years when it's 2 hours to get from one side to the other. When we're locked up on Old South all the way through, that's when people are going to say, okay, this stuff that we've been talking about, it has to happen. And I don't want it to get like that. I don't want it to have to be that way and be reactive like that, but I think that's where we're heading. And so it's not a study necessarily, but it's being aware of when you're putting too much,
But Matt, we do have in here responsible stewardship of our region's future. And, maybe that's a little, high, pie in the sky way of phrasing it, but to me, that sounds like exactly what you're asking for.
Yeah, and it may be, but I'm emphasizing it.
I just wanted to go back to Dave. Yeah, a follow up.
No, I'm good. And thank you for clarifying that. I mean, Matt, I think that, we're all painfully aware of how different people's qualities or thoughts of quality of life have changed on a seasonal basis, depending on how busy we are. And I think we're all painfully aware. Thank you.
Yeah, just some thoughts on the process that might help everyone understand this a little bit better. So Matt, I hear you, but we specifically went out to make these draft objectives broad so that they would encompass anything that we wanted to cover. So like, for instance, the carrying capacity is a policy. We have fostering cooperative policies for land use protection and development. And I understand like wanting to have certain things highlighted, and we already thought about that. So the idea was that the vision and the mission would actually go to the legislature when we updated our state act, but the objectives would remain an internal working document of the planning commission so that they could continuously be updated to meet the needs that come up. So if carrying capacity becomes the most important thing, we will put that in. So and not everyone's aware of that. I had a big role in this, so I just want to make it known that the objectives are going to be continuously updated and reviewed as needed.
Yeah.
Well, so, I feel like the phrase carrying capacity is not the phrase we need. It's about what is our shared vision for what Nantucket looks like as a community in the future, right?
Yeah.
Because carrying capacity implies that there's a fixed set of resources. Well, we might not want to go to what we have the capacity for. We may decide our vision is something less than that. I do think that having the conversation about what is sustainable, economically, environmentally, quality of life, all of those things. And there is an evolution of what living on Nantucket or life on Nantucket, it has been changing. And, someone who perhaps has been here their whole life and was born in 1947, it looks at today and says, holy moly. But the person who came here 15 years ago and has managed to start a successful business and is only successful because development or growth has happened, right? Have different perspectives. And so how do we bring people together to have that conversation about what is our shared vision? What are our values? It's a values-based conversation, not a resources-based conversation. The resources inform how you get to your values or don't, or choose not to. But that's really the level of conversation we need to have. And that is why our board is really wanted to have joint conversations with other boards. So we're doing more of this values-oriented conversation about what are we trying to control? Like, are we limiting schools because we don't want more houses? Right, like what are we trying to achieve by specific policy decisions? And how does that fit into a values framework is where I'd like to go long term.
I like the way you talk.
Yeah.
Just gotta figure out how.
I think that, those are some really
Add.
good points. I had someone say today, what's this movement with like making people continue with septic systems in watershed areas as like an anti-development strategy?
Bingo. And that went on.
It's a perfect
in 2006.
example.
Okay, and this is part of the past stuff we're not supposed to talk about, but we blocked sewer. And now we're fixing it and adding. And we kind of made it difficult on people, and that, you know what I mean? It's bizarre how we are. This community is the greatest place on earth, no matter how much we complain. There's no better place in the world to be in Nantucket. Case closed.
Agreed.
However, we have bad memories, okay? And we need to, and this is what I said in my little interview last summer, we have to admit that we are a tourist economy. Like, we can't just make it not be that, just because you don't like certain things. Admit who we are. We have to accept it. Okay, we don't have to go out and advertise Nantucket per se, but we also don't want to become an uninviting place and like negative and have some, something happen against Nantucket because we're so, I don't want to say everybody's negative, but there is a lot of negativity here. And I get concerned about that. That's one of my biggest fears, is that we're going to negative ourselves right to where we want to be. You know what I mean? But as far as like the transportation and the how do you get here and all of those kind of things. When this airport thing happened, I knew that was coming because I already knew, talked to them about this. I said, this is gonna be negative, even though it's really nothing happening. It's other than the parking part. I'm not saying that those people impacted doesn't mean anything. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's not making more airplanes come here. It's just accommodating a little bit. It turns into, we don't need them anymore. We don't want them anymore. Why is JetBlue coming? I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, how do you even respond to this? Yeah, it's because you get settled in to what you do for work, how you pay your bills, and you think that that's all set now. But it is very hard to live here if you're new. If you built a house in the last 10 years, and we were talking about permitting earlier, this is the hardest place to build on the planet, Nantucket. And we act like it's easy. No, it isn't. It used to be 35, 40 years ago. You just walk down the street, build another house and buy somebody's property for $40,000 and or they give it to you. It's unbelievable how different things are. I'm one of the lucky ones, but I can tell you it is, I just don't know how people do it. And that's why I'm not against things. Doesn't make me pro-development. It just makes me realize how difficult it is. And I want people to be here. I want to find ways to make deed restricted houses, incentivization of that. Like there's a million ways it can be done, but it's not going to show on paper like, oh, we've got another 200 covenants in a year. That's never going to happen. But we need to, we're working in the right direction, Brooke. It's just, it's brutally complicated. 10 years ago, no one knew what the different housing entities were. They thought housing authority was the housing, the housing Nantucket. Now people do understand it now, I think, pretty much.
I'm working hard on that.
It's definitely not like it was a few years back. So there's a lot of great people doing a lot of great things here. It's just hard to find the good news. So that's my big concern. I'm not worried about Nantucket financially. I'm not worried about it floating away. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the negativity. So that's it for me tonight.
I just have to say quickly.
Yeah, is there an action?
We already take these conversations into our review, and that's why we have celebration and appreciation as a specific objective.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what I was trying to bring it back to. On the mission statement, I think it encompasses everything we're talking about, and we could go on and workshop on this for the next 10 days.
Yeah, I love it.
And we should, but not tonight. So I think that this was just to give feedback.
Yes.
Generally.
Yeah, to give it some exposure outside of our group.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
thank
much.
you.
So.
Back to adjourn.
All of
Can we
you for this.
adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Hey, just to be clear, only the select board is adjourning. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is there a second? Okay. Brooke Moore, Tom Dixon.
Aye.
Nothing, Tom Taylor.
Okay, and
Thanks,
so,
you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
all right,
guys.
so NPEDC has a little bit more business to do. So last item on our agenda is approval of minutes. We have the minutes of December 5th. Yeah, I know. The minutes of December 18th were already approved, so those do not need to be approved again tonight. And then we have the minutes of January 22nd. So do we have any comments on the minutes of December 5th from NPEDC commissioners? And if there are none, is there a motion to approve? Second?
Second.
I'll take Dave for the second. Roll call vote, Seth,
Aye.
Dawn,
Aye.
Wendy,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Nat,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and Mary, aye. And then the minutes of January 22nd, any comments from commissioners? If there are none, we'll take a motion not to approve. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Dave.
Oh,
Roll call vote, Seth,
Aye.
Dawn,
Aye.
Wendy,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Nat,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and Mary, aye. Thank you all. And then do we have a motion for the NPEDC to adjourn?
So moved.
It's motion by Don, second by Nat. Roll call, Seth,
Aye.
Don, Wendy,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Nat,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and Mary, aye. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Seth.
Good night.
The process.